Hi, I'm Dr. Joseph Peck, and I'd like to share with you about the 60-60 experiment. This is something I just began a week ago, and it's already having a profound impact on me. This is about doing life with God 60-60. For 60 days, you intentionally connect with God at least every 60 minutes. So you could set your watch to go off automatically every hour, or you could set your phone to vibrate, or you could leave sticky notes on your computer and on your mirror, on your refrigerator, at work, etc. However you want to remind yourself to connect with God intentionally every 60 minutes, do that. So this is something that I learned about recently in a life group that I'm in at my church, Soul Purpose Church, and it's based on this book, Soul Revolution, by John Burke. And I didn't really feel like being in another life group because I'm already connected to a lot of Christians and in a lot of Christian fellowship. But because someone at the church kept asking me about being in a life group together, I went ahead and said yes. And so about a week ago, I read the first 3 chapters of this book. And all 3 of the chapters spoke to me, but the 3rd chapter, the story in there, really spoke to me strongly. And the next morning on a Sunday, when I was at the life group, the pastor, Alan, went ahead and shared that same story in chapter 3 really spoke to him strongly. So I'm going to share with you about that. And the other thing I'm going to point out too is that the leader of our life group, Dave, was talking about the 60-60 experiment being analogous to when pilots used to fly a long time ago. There used to be a pilot actually flying the airplane, and then next to him there'd be a navigator who knew where the plane was and where it was going and would give instructions to the pilot. Well, you're the pilot in your life, and Jesus wants to be the navigator. And he wants you to make adjustments to the direction you're going, moment by moment, not just day by day or even every 3 hours, but moment by moment. So let me go ahead and share, let me share this story from chapter 3 of this book. It's called Reorient, Doing Life with God 60-60. So for the first 45 years of his life, Frank Laubach lived a pretty average life. He was an American-born Christian living in a remote part of the Philippines. Yet on his 46th birthday, he wrote in his journal, "I no longer have the sense that life is all before me, as I had a few years ago. Some of it is behind, and a miserable poor part it is. So far below what I had dreamed that I dare not even think of it, nor dare I think much of the future. This present moment, if it is full of God, is the only refuge I have from poisonous disappointment and even almost rebellion against God." Boy, I can identify with that one. Yet that year, 1930, despite the disappointment of life so far, something changed. By 1970, 40 years later, when Laubach passed away, his influence had spread worldwide. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes, he was perhaps the single greatest educator of modern times, voted Man of the Year in America. In the last 40 years of his life, Laubach developed the Each One Teach One literacy campaign, used to teach 60 million people to read in their own language all across the globe. He wrote over 50 books and became an international presence in literacy, religious, and government circles, having an influence on poverty, injustice, and illiteracy worldwide. His influence spread to presidents as well as across the underdeveloped areas of the world. What changed in that year for Frank Laubach? Many who have written about him say little about his spiritual life because they don't understand it. But in his own words, 1930 was the year he began to experiment with a reorienting, revolutionary kind of prayer that changed everything. In Laubach's journal, published under the title Practicing His Presence, in January 1930 he wrote, "2 years ago, a profound dissatisfaction led me to begin trying to line up my actions with the will of God about every 15 minutes or every half hour. People said it was impossible. I judged from what I heard that few people are really trying that. But this year I have started out to live my waking moments in conscious listening to the inner voice, asking without ceasing, "What, Father, do you desire this minute?" It is clear that this is exactly what Jesus was doing all day, every day. Laubach began an experiment much like the 60-60 experiment, in moment-by-moment continuous conversation with God. Laubach said, it is exactly that moment-by-moment surrender, responsiveness, obedience, sensitivity, pliability, lost in His love, that I desire to explore with all my might. After 30 days, Laubach already felt a joy he had never experienced in 16 years as a Christian. Here's what he wrote in his journal after 30 days. "This sense of cooperation with God in little things is what so astonishes me. I need something and turn around to find it waiting for me. I must work, to be sure, but there is God working along with me. God takes care of all the rest. My part is to live this hour in continuous inner conversation with God and in perfect responsiveness to His will, to make this hour gloriously rich. This seems to be all I need to think about." After 60 days, Laubach wrote this in his journal. "The experiment is interesting. Although I'm not very successful thus far, the thought of God slips out of my sight for, I suppose, 2/3 of every day. Yet this thing of keeping in constant touch with God is the most amazing thing I ever ran across. It is working. As I analyze myself, I find several things happening to me as a result of these 2 months. This concentration upon God is strenuous, but everything else has ceased to be so. I think more clearly. I forget less frequently. Things which I did with a strain before, I now do easily and with no effort whatever. I worry about nothing and lose no sleep. If He is there, the universe is with me. My task is simple and clear." Nearly a year later, Laubach wrote this in his journal. "It is difficult to convey to another the joy of having broken into the new sea of realizing God's here-ness. How I wish that a dozen or more persons would try this and write their experiences so that each would know what the other was finding as a result. The results, I think, would astonish the world. At least the results of my own efforts are astounding to me." Can you hear it in Frank Laubach's journals? This eternal quality of living that comes flowing up from within as we do life in relationship with God. Now, I have a close relationship with God, and I'm in conversation with God normally throughout my day. At least I felt so. But this experiment is making me fine-tune the navigation of my life. Instead of doing something for 3 hours and then tuning back into God, I'm asking God moment by moment, what do you want me to do now? And I may be working on a longer project, and He might have me abandon that temporarily to call someone or to send an email or to do something else. And it's those little things where the gold nuggets are. And to just show you that this is already working in an amazing way in my life, let me just share several things that happened in the past week. As I mentioned, a week ago on Sunday, I went to my first life group with the Soul Revolution, and the next day I sent out my prayer request to my prayer intercessors. That was something that I used to do on a weekly basis for maybe a year, but then I stopped doing it about 2 years ago, and I've wanted to get back, but I just haven't been able to. And even though I've written down in my journal to do it, I just didn't seem to be able to get it done. But I did get it done. And also that within 24 hours of going to my first life group or small group session, I also was able to completely clear out the inbox for my Gmail, my email account. And that's something I've wanted to do for years. And the best I've been able to do was maybe get down to about 30 emails. But the Holy Spirit led me on how to reorganize my folders for Gmail. And then it gave me a plan for how to keep that inbox empty. So now I find I'm able to respond to people in a timely fashion and not have this clutter in my inbox, which distracts me. And then a third thing that happened is I was prompted to ask for recommendations from people that I knew for LinkedIn. And even though I'd had a LinkedIn social networking account for about 3 years, I only had one recommendation. I never really was pursuing those. Well, within 24 hours of asking for those recommendations, I got about 9 back, and they blew me away. And what people had to say just really inspired me, because they were seeing me as God sees me. And just hearing the difference I'd made in their lives just was so encouraging. And then another thing that's happened is I began video messages. This one's just one example. This is something that I've known I needed to do for a long time. I've known how to do for a long time, but I just didn't seem to be able to get started. So I challenge you to do the 60-60 experiment and to record your journey as you go along in a notebook. And I think you'll be amazed, astonished at what God does in your life. Blessings.